Hello again, everyone. This is June 16, 2018. Our lesson is titled today, Where Are Gods? Part 2. We've got Asherah, a Canaanite goddess, in Exodus chapter 34, verse 13 to 14, which I'll read for you right now. Take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land whither thou goest, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. But ye shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. Then we've got in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 19, Elijah deals with 400 prophets of Asherah at Mount Carmel. Let's read that one. Now therefore, send and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400, which eat at Jezebel's table. Then we've got also Ashtoreth, a goddess of war and fertility, in Judges chapter 2, verse 12 to 13. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtoreth. And some other gods, I won't bother to read their scriptures now, but you've heard them all. Baal, baal-zebub, Chemosh, Dagon, Molech of the Ammonites. There are just some. There are other gods listed there in the scriptures. And these are gods of the ancient times. You've heard a lot about them in the Torah, or what many call the Old Testament. And all kinds of finds have been dug up about these gods. They've showed the little figures that people made of them, like some stone figures sometimes. And they were worshipping these gods. The children of Israel also heavily worshipped these gods. Now, if these gods had massive power, I'm wondering to myself, why don't the nuclear bomb-ready countries today just save a lot of money? Even the countries who want to make nuclear bombs. Why are they going through all the hassles and the red tapes and, all the stuff that they got to go through, only to be fought down in the end about having nuclear weapons? And then they'll get all kinds of sanctions put on them and so on. Why bother? Then you think of all the money that it costs these countries to make all these bombs. And their people in their countries are cursing out their governments about the extra taxation to help to build these great bombs. When all these world leaders who have these nuclear bombs have to do is save themselves all that fuss and stress and all that uncomfortable lying and cover-ups and all the money that it costs, and just use the gods of ancient times. I mean, the Torah tells us it's there and history tells us, but have we been given something fake, or maybe something overemphasized, something sensationalized about these gods? that there were these gods that people made of wood and stone and probably pieces of metal and so on. But they sensationalized the stories of the gods and included them in some kind of myth and saga to make them sound much stronger. But what would be the reason for that? Just to trick the people. So they make all these gods seem so powerful. But people today are spending all kinds of money that they don't have, countries, governments, to make these bombs. When the powerful gods could just be invoked once again and just go fight your enemy. The gods are going to give the victory. You're running yourself broke trying to buy all these bombs, trying to set up all these nuclear bomb building facilities, these nuclear plants and so on. Why don't they just let the gods do it from ancient times? Or is it the case that the gods were not as powerful as they're telling us in history and in the Torah, which places a problem for the Torah as well? As I told you, I am investigating God. Well, as a consequence of that, I have to take into account the gods of ancient times as well. Because if the God of the Torah or the God of Israel is fighting these gods or the people that were making these gods from other nations, why was he fighting gods who never really had power? If they were just a piece of stick and stone and they're coming up against his people, why was he fighting these gods? Or if the children of Israel knew these gods had no power, why were they fighting them and calling on the Lord God of heaven to fight against these gods? It's just simple. They were fighting against people. These gods don't have no power. Because if a god, because you see, in ancient times, people thought gods were just like full of awe, and you should reverence them to the hilt. And you cannot get away from a god. You cannot overpower a god. This unseen thing. This thing with inexhaustible power. You as a mere mortal cannot overpower these gods. That's why in the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel, it made a big story of it in the scriptures, because a man actually fought with a god, his god, in this case the Hebrew god, so it had to be shown, given a special spot. And something big had to come out of the story, that his name was changed as a sign of a great blessing that's going to come into his life and his people. Because it's just unnormal to fight against a god, let alone to win against one. But to show that he never really, completely overpowered him, he still got hurt in the end. But anyway, why are they wasting all this money? Sending troops to war, getting killed like ancient times. Everything else is improving in the world. And you're still sending people to war, and they're getting killed, even if you win against the enemy. Why don't you just save the lives of your soldiers, your citizens who sign up in your armies, and just let the power of the gods do it, if the gods really had that power. You hear all these magnificent stories, these wonderful stories of the gods striking and sending down lightning and thunder and just like zapping people and so on. But today, people are building all these weapons and still sending their people to war, and the people getting sick, and then they got to pay out all this insurance and whatever when all that stuff happens. People are getting ruined in their bodies, coming home with like missing a leg and so on, can't walk anymore, stuff like that. All kinds of depression and so on. When the gods, if they were as powerful as the writings tell us that they were in the ancient times, how could gods lose their power today? Men were fighting men. So and they said gods were fighting gods, and sometimes a god would beat another god. Well, the gods that won weren't those ones ruling with the same kind of power today. I'm not saying why aren't they ruling today. I'm saying why aren't they ruling with that same power today, where they are zapping things and burning up a mountain and things like that. Why? Where are these gods of the ancient times? Because I'm investigating God, I'm investigating the Torah, and I want to find out if these gods were real. If these gods were not real, what is all the to-do in the story about the God of Israel warning against these gods and himself fighting these gods? What kind of book is this when you say the word Torah? Where are these gods hiding today with power while their people are crying out? And the people who are victorious today, why are they going through all they're going through? Why not just summon the gods? You say, well, they do all their stuff and they summon their gods and they do their sacrifices today and so on. Yeah, but notice that they still make guns and bombs, which means they got to do something with their hands to go and fight the wars themselves. Their gods are not fighting for them. Where are the gods of ancient Greek mythology, for example? To me, it seems like these gods of ancient times in these stories were just a way to, as I said in part 1, to unify people under a common belief with a perfectly and skillfully applied or administered dosage of fear that was an inherent part of the teachings of these gods. The religious system will include fear while teaching the God, so that the people who come together in that religion will unify and support their kings, and they will not be allowed to escape that religious thought and mind control. Because when they came together under that one belief in that religion to learn about that God that they must worship, fear was embedded in the teachings to cause them not to leave a snare for men's souls and for men's participation and for men's support. Fear that you're going to die, something bad's going to happen to you, and in more modern times, it sounds more like you're going to hell. Now, if the gods were real, did you need to cause people to have so much fear? To threaten people with the doctrines? Because once the people saw the God in action, in battle, zapping the enemy, they would fear on their own and not do anything wrong against the God or against their country or king. And they probably wouldn't have even bothered to fear. They would just reverence the God so much because they saw with their own eyes the power of the God. So they wouldn't have any interest probably in fighting against their own king or their own land. Because they knew, why try to leave this land, this country, my people? Because I have a God that will protect us all. I have seen it with my own eyes. Maybe people did not see these things with their eyes. They were just stories. Where are those gods today? Who in ancient times could not apparently lose their power. Everybody had to believe in them, it seems. But today, you don't have to believe in them. So a lot of evangelism is done to make sure you believe. Even Hebrew Israelites are doing evangelism. I thought evangelism was done from the Christian church days. But now I see Hebrew Israelites on the streets doing street evangelism. Look now, since ancient times and even in modern times, there have been all kinds of catastrophes like earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, hurricanes, cyclones, even in modern times. Think of even the recent ones in the past 10 or 20 years that you've heard of, these stuff coming out of nature, forces of nature. Even wildfires. You notice that the gods don't save people today who worship them today in these New Age religions and in these other religions that are not called New Age religions. Even in ancient times, the gods did not save the people. They say the earth was flooded once or more than once, some people say. You got cities, whole societies that were buried underwater. The gods did not save them. If the gods were that powerful, like we are told, why did the gods not use their power to save the people who worship them? And we're not just talking about, for us who believe in the God of the Torah, that, well, if he's sending the destruction, their gods can't save them. I'm talking about the other catastrophes that wasn't really spelled out in the scriptures, although you say, well, the Most High sends them all these catastrophes. But really, I got to question the God of the Torah as well. I really have to. Everything is on the table now. Because like I said, the moment I could see that the Torah forbids animal sacrifices, but we have been taught for eons that the Torah says the God of Israel commanded animal sacrifices, then everything has to go back on the table. I got to start flipping through, shuffling the papers, looking and searching again and rereading stuff and so on. The moment you can be taught all your life to sacrifice animals, and then you finally see that the God of Israel could not have possibly authorized that, I got to go back and reread the whole thing, and rethink the whole thing. So I'm rethinking the Bible. Everything now is under question. Everything in the scriptures. Because what else have we been led astray regarding? And these gods of ancient times, apparently they were living everywhere. But some common places, they were found like on a hilltop, on a mountaintop, in a temple, places like that. But it seems like they would even be in a battlefield. They might be out in your field when you're dealing with your crop. They're going to be in the sky to make sure rain falls. They're in the rain itself. They're in the sunshine. They're everywhere. So these gods of ancient times, even up on the mountains, if you ran up there yourself, you never saw them up there. People have been doing mountain climbing from as far back as man can remember. Nobody ever ran into one of these gods on the mountains. Now we have airplanes. Nobody flew through the sky, came back reporting that they saw gods from being inside the cockpit. But these gods are supposedly everywhere. Well, since they were everywhere in times past, in ancient times, like very, very old times, and people could not escape them, they're seen everywhere. They're seeing them everywhere, based on the stories, the reports that we've gotten. Well, why are they not everywhere today? They're on the mountain tops and so on, they're everywhere. Well, it seems like today, if they really had that much power, then they should be everywhere today. But you don't seem to find them in your car, They don't show up in the train, in the subway. You don't find them in your microwave. And even a god of fire from ancient times should be able to be found in your oven. But you never see him there, right? But I bet you in ancient times you would have seen a god in a fire. Somebody would have thought about that. They might have called it an angel or whatever else they want to call it. But people could see those things. Now, if the scriptures were being written today, and the scriptures never happened in ancient times, but now is when it's all happening, and we're seeing these gods all around today, and we are the ancient people. Let's just imagine that. So that 5,000 years from now is when people would be reading our stories, and they would call us in 2018 the ancient people who believed in these gods. We would have written in the Bible, even though we're not seeing these gods, that the gods were in our cars, that the gods were in our microwaves, that the gods were in our ovens. Now, should the people 5,000 years from now reading our ancient stories believe that and have salvation or faith for salvation based on that? Or should they wonder if people in 2018 had all these many powerful gods around? Should they wonder? Well, should we today wonder about what happened in times past if the stories were sensationalized, were increased, were multiplied in its power to deceive, to trick people? Sure, there were gods, because people made them, but were they the kinds of gods that we've been led to believe, that had all kinds of power of light and so on, and could strike you with a bolt of lightning, and they were flying from one part of the heaven to the next part, and flying down to the earth and flying all over? This is all crazy madness, people. How come we can't see them today? And for these storms and tsunamis and so on, in some cases, people were worshipping these gods today, even in modern times, that were the gods over nature. The god of earthquakes, the god of thunder, the god of the tsunami, the god of hurricanes and so on. The water god and so on. Yet the water rose up in a tsunami and so on, and covered up whole cities and so on, even in modern times, killed lots of people in modern times. And in some cases, these catastrophes, these storms and tsunamis were killing some people. And I'm not trying to offend anyone here with this. I'm rethinking, I'm teaching. This is just having you think. In some cases, these earthquakes and tsunamis and so on and hurricanes are killing some of the people and breaking down their houses who worship these gods. You know how people are really worshipping these gods for the most part today? In books. You're a book worshipper. People go buy a book learning New Age, and buy a book learning about this, and a book learning about occult, and a book learning about that. And you start writing this name all over of this god. You write him all over your house and all over your whatever. You're a book god worshipper. Your gods live in your books. They don't live in your purse to give you the money when you need it. They're not living in your car to help you out with a flat tire when you're stranded with a flat tire at 1:30 in the night in a very, very far out country place. You can't even get a signal to call a tow truck. The gods aren't living in your cars at that moment. So you suffer. But if it was in ancient times, the gods would magically show up and they would assist you, especially if you were some high priest or a king. The gods would definitely show up and would get you out of that time, or just put you in their chariot and take you off and get you back home. These are the stories written about gods of ancient times. But where are those gods today? Why can't they if they were that powerful? How come you, the puny human who needed them so much, survived, and they, the ones with the power, can't be seen today? But you can be seen everywhere. If I look outside, I can see a person, but I can't see one of these gods anymore like people saw them in the ancient times. Tell me, where are gods? They're in myths. They're in stories. They're in the past. They're in trickeries. They're in lies. That's where they are. The lies of the past. That's the best I can find when I think about it. See, that's how I have to look at it, because I cannot see them. And so, questions like these come up as I am now investigating God for myself. I still continue to read books and learn from all kinds of people, but I must investigate. See, because when I read your book and listen to your teaching, as I've done for years from when I was a child, I learned from your investigation, but it didn't make sense to me. And when I asked the questions, I couldn't get it. So now, I want to do my investigation for myself. And I want to find out if people really saw these gods do all these magnificent things in ancient times, but we can't see them do it today. And I want to find out, since people were worshipping these gods in ancient times, including the God of the Torah, so-called Yahweh, I want to find out if God wants me to worship God. You know, don't laugh. Does God want me to worship God? Well, here I try to keep a straight face, and I ended up laughing. So you see what I mean? That at some place inside of you, it hits you. You know, the extra religious ones of us, especially the people who are close to their teachers or who teach, most of them, but not all, most of them, especially the ones who are not sincere in trying to help people with religious things or with the Torah, those ones are going to just shoot down quickly. They don't understand the search for the soul, because they don't want your soul to search, because you will stop believing them and you will start questioning them too much. Does God want you to worship God? And how did He communicate that to you? Where? In another book? The same books I told you were written to sensationalize the stories of the past? You got to figure it out for yourself. Does God want you to worship God, or does that cancel out the question? Does the question cancel out itself? Where, I ask, are these gods of ancient times?